Have you ever wondered what life was really like in the Victorian era? Not the romanticized version we see in period dramas, with their elegant balls and proper etiquette, but the gritty reality that existed beneath the surface. The Victorian era is often portrayed as a time of progress, innovation, and moral virtue. But what if I told you that behind closed doors, a much darker reality existed? Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into the shadows of the Victorian era, the aspects of 19th century life that are rarely discussed in polite company, yet shape the experiences of millions. If you've ever felt that something wasn't quite right about how this period is presented in mainstream history, you're absolutely correct. There's a fascinating disconnect between the public face of Victorian society and its troubling underbelly. Let's begin with the stark reality of Victorian London, a city of extreme contrasts. While the aristocracy and growing middle class enjoyed unprecedented wealth and comfort, just blocks away, people were living in conditions that are difficult to comprehend by today's standards. The Industrial Revolution had drawn massive numbers of people into cities that were completely unprepared for such population growth. In London alone, over 100,000 people lived as purefinders, individuals who collected dog excrement from the streets to sell to tanners for leather production. Yes, this was considered a legitimate profession for the desperately poor. The housing situation was equally disturbing. Families of 6 or more might live in a single room with no running water or sanitation. The Thames River, which ran through the heart of London, was so polluted with human waste and industrial chemicals that it was essentially an open sewer. The snow was so unbearable during the summer of 1858 that it caused what became known as the Great Stink, forcing Parliament to adjourn due to the overwhelming odor. Disease was rampant. Cholera, typhoid, and tuberculosis claimed countless lives, particularly among the poor. Child labor during this period was not just common, it was institutional. Children as young as 4 worked in mines, factories, and as chimney sweeps. These climbing boys would be sent up narrow, hot chimneys to clean soot, often developing respiratory diseases and cancer from the constant exposure to carcinogens. Many became stuck in the flues and suffocated to death. Factory children worked 12 to 16-hour days operating dangerous machinery, with many losing fingers, limbs, or even their lives in accidents that were simply considered part of doing business. Before we continue with our exploration of Victorian darkness, I want to take a moment to invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. Every week, we dive into these kinds of lesser-known historical realities, the parts of history that are often sanitized or completely omitted from conventional narratives. By subscribing, you'll ensure you don't miss our upcoming videos on other misunderstood historical periods and phenomena. Now, let's continue our journey into Victorian shadows. Perhaps one of the most disturbing aspects of Victorian society was its approach to mental health and medicine. Asylums of the era were less about treatment and more about containment. People could be committed for reasons ranging from genuine mental illness to behaviors that simply deviated from social norms, women who were too outspoken, individuals suffering from epilepsy, or even those experiencing grief that was deemed excessive. Inside these institutions, patients were often subjected to treatments that amounted to torture, ice baths, spinning chairs designed to induce vomiting, and physical restraints were common. Medical practices of the time were equally alarming. Bloodletting remained popular well into the Victorian era, with doctors believing that removing blood could cure everything from headaches to pneumonia. Medicines frequently contained dangerous substances like mercury, arsenic, and opium. Laudanum, a tincture of opium, was prescribed liberally for everything from coughs to female troubles. It was so widely used that addiction was commonplace, particularly among women, who had few other socially acceptable forms of escape from the constraints of Victorian life. Speaking of constraints, we cannot discuss Victorian darkness without addressing the suffocating social expectations placed on women. While often portrayed as a time of chivalry and respect for women, the Victorian era was defined by extreme gender inequality. Women were considered the property of their fathers and then their husbands, with virtually no legal rights of their own until late in the period. A married woman couldn't own property, sign contracts, or even keep her own wages if she worked. Divorce was nearly impossible for women to obtain, and if they did manage it, they typically lost custody of their children and were socially ostracized. The infamous corset epitomizes the physical constraints placed on Victorian women. These garments, pulled tight enough to achieve the coveted 18-inch waist, caused internal organ damage, broken ribs, and difficulty breathing. Women frequently fainted from oxygen deprivation, a condition that was romanticized as feminine delicacy rather than recognized as the medical emergency it actually was. The Victorian obsession with death and mourning reveals another layer of their complex relationship with mortality. After Prince Albert died in 1861, Queen Victoria wore black for the remaining 40 years of her life, setting a standard for elaborate mourning rituals that the society eagerly embraced. Mourning clothes, jewelry made from the hair of the deceased, and post-mortem photography, where the dead were posed as if alive, often with living family members, became commonplace. This fascination with death existed alongside a society experiencing mortality rates we can hardly imagine today. In the poorest districts of Victorian cities, infant mortality approached 50%, meaning half of all children died before their 5th birthday. Death was an ever-present reality, and the ritualization of mourning provided structure to a society grappling with constant loss. The Victorian era also witnessed the birth of modern criminology and forensic science, largely in response to the unprecedented criminal activity in rapidly growing urban centers. Jack the Ripper may be the most famous Victorian criminal, but he was just one element of a vast criminal underworld that included organized gangs, pickpockets, and con artists. Child exploitation was rampant, with children trained as thieves or forced into prostitution. Speaking of prostitution, it's estimated that up to 80,000 women worked as prostitutes in London alone during the Victorian period. Many were driven to this work by extreme poverty and lack of other employment options. The infamous Contagious Diseases Acts of the 1860s allowed police to arrest any woman suspected of being a prostitute and force her to undergo invasive medical examinations. These acts exemplified the Victorian double standard. Men's pursuit of vice was tacitly accepted, while women bore the legal and social consequences. As we near the end of our exploration of Victorian darkness, it's worth considering why this period continues to fascinate us. Perhaps it's because the Victorian era represents a mirror to our own time, a society undergoing rapid technological change, grappling with the human costs of industrialization and urbanization, and attempting to reconcile traditional values with modernizing forces. The contradictions of Victorian society, its public prudishness alongside private vice, its celebration of progress alongside exploitation of the vulnerable, speak to contradictions that still exist in our world today. Before I wrap up, I want to emphasize that understanding the dark side of history isn't about dismissing the genuine achievements of the past. The Victorian era gave us remarkable innovations, literature, and social reforms. But by acknowledging the full picture, both light and shadow, we gain a more nuanced understanding of how societies function and evolve. What aspects of our current society do you think future generations might look back on with similar horror? What blind spots might we have that seem normal to us but will be considered barbaric by those who come after us? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'm genuinely interested in hearing your perspectives on this. If you found value in today's video, please give it a like and consider subscribing for more content that explores the hidden sides of history. Don't forget to check the description for ways you can support the channel and help us continue creating this kind of content. Until next time, remember that history is rarely as simple as it first appears, and sometimes the most important stories are the ones that didn't make it into the textbooks.